So if you know I want to start a business, for example, but by God in power, this thing has to go work. That's fine, have faith. But there's 99 other things you have to do in addition to faith.
There's an understanding from citizens that they do not have much control when it comes to these things. Mm-hmm. And perhaps that's why there's the alpha do kind of mentality and attitude.
They have doubts, they lack trust because we've overpromised and underdelivered so many times throughout the last 60 years.
Welcome to Honestly Speaking, where we have honest conversations about real issues shaping our lives. I'm your host, Antonia Howard, and today we're talking about something you've probably thought about, something you've probably debated with your peers, the Sierra Leonean mindset. But to frame this conversation, I'll have to take you all the way back to, let's say, the early 2000s during President Kaba's tenure, where he spoke about badat. He says Salon people didn't get badat. But he was basically just highlighting the deep-seated attitudes, behaviors, you name it, that shape the way we engage with each other, or engage in our civic responsibilities or duties. And then fast forward to President Nkrumah, there also came the campaign for attitudinal and behavioral change, which was also meant to do the same thing, just deal with those habits, attitudes we have that he believed were holding us back at the time. But it's all not doom and gloom, right, about Sierra Leoneans. We have good people. We are good people. We are known as a resilient people. We've been through war. We've had Ebola and other public health crises. We've seen natural disasters. But no matter what life throws at us, we always find a way to push forward. We always find a way to come up, right? So what is this Sierra Leonean mindset? What are the social, cultural, psychological traits that define us as a people, that shape our national identity? What are the beliefs, habits, attitudes that influence the way we deal with ourselves and how we engage in our civic roles and responsibilities? Are these traits good? Do they hold us back? Or do they simply reflect the resilient people that we are? So to unpack all of this, I have with me in the studio Dama James. He is a small business owner, a specialist in business change and digital transformation. He has lived and worked in Europe and Sierra Leone, which gives him firsthand experience of how different cultures and mindsets influence progress and growth. And if you follow him on social media, he almost always has unique opinions, perspectives on governance, growth, change, infrastructure, development, you name it. And I think that's what makes him the perfect guest for this conversation. So welcome, Dama.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Right. It's a pleasure having you.
Thanks.
My first question to you is, when you think about Sierra Leoneans or the Sierra Leonean mindset, what comes to mind? What do you think about? How would you describe it or define it?
Sure.
If you can.
That's a great first question. I think the answer is some of it lies in your introduction. I think resilience, tenacious. But sadly, I think we shouldn't have to be resilient and tenacious in the first place. That seems to result in, trying to justify the struggle. It's almost like we're honoring resilience when we should probably be dismantling the structures and systems that need you to be resilient. But I think that mindset is not different to many post-colonial countries. I think we go back even further than the presidents you mentioned. I'm of an age where I've lived through all 5 heads of state, starting with Shaka Stevens. I'm giving away my age. So I know that your Ghanas, your Zimbabwe's, we all came out of, post-colonial independence rather, with a view that it's time to shape our own identity. Where I think we diverged slightly as Sierra Leone is we had the same things you said. We had war, we had Ebola, we've had COVID like everyone else, had the mudslides. So many traumatic things have happened. We had a one-party rule for 24 years. So I think we almost celebrate struggle and survival in a way, which is like, we don't go through this. Tell God thank you. And when you meet someone, part of that psyche is, first things you ask, how do you up and down? How do you have back? I'll tell God thank you. That is a very, very Sierra Leonean thing.
Yep.
So I think part of our mindset is one of survival, day at a time, some lack of planning, and it moves on to just almost outsourcing execution to faith in a way.
Absolutely. But would you say that's positive? Is that a good thing or a bad thing? How would you classify that?
My view is it's not necessarily good.
And why is that?
I believe that when you, going backwards, when you outsource execution to faith, for example, you de-emphasize your inputs and you de-emphasize your efforts and you don't value your efforts. So if I want to start a business, for example, but by God in power, this thing has to work. That's fine. Have faith. But there's 99 other things you have to do in addition to faith. Having lived in Benin Republic, spent time in Nigeria, have a family in Ghana, my sister and my brother-in-law lived in the UK for nearly 3 decades. They have faith, but also they double down on effort. So I see a lot of, I don't set this tiaso up, so I'll walk. Or, I've got the job, so I'll be okay. And so there's this idea that just one aspect or one factor is enough for success in whatever you do. For me, I think that's not necessarily a good thing.
I don't know if you'd be able to answer this, but where do you think that comes from? Like, where do you think that idea comes from? Because this is true. A lot of people, like you said, go into business and they don't necessarily acknowledge that they may have to do at least 50% of that work or 60% of that work. So where does that come from?
I think it's community. I think some of our values that foster solidarity, they also maybe passively discourage ambition. We treat ambition as a dirty word. If you want to be successful, you have to be ambitious. And when you see someone doing very well, it may go back to what the previous president said, the bad acts. Someone's really successful, doing well. The other people are saying, Nigeria, for example, like Nigeria, they come last. They foster competition. And then you have other communities that, come together and they actually push you and say, do very well. Your success is our success. I see from my observations, living here, living elsewhere, there's something we do, which is if someone seems ambitious, it becomes, they're too ambitious. And it may just be something as simple as I'm going to double my efforts to get to where I want to be. What makes it more visible, and I also think it's the reason why perhaps we have that mindset, is because we have a lot of reliance on government and a lot of employment is political. So what you have is people aspiring to be politicians. And you have to be ambitious because it's a dog-eat-dog world. So what tends to happen is we partisan that space, and then it sort of trickles down into just normal everyday discourse. If someone wants to be the head of a business, wants to go for a promotion, we don't think, wow, you're doing well, I want to be like you. You're like, that should be me. And I think that's deep-rooted in our not big pasibuto. Na village you come out, village speaking, not begin for saying then people there for David. So I think we passively and sometimes actively discourage ambition.
Would you say that Sierra Leoneans are resistant to change? I know that's a generalization, but from the work that you do and your experience so far, trying to digitize systems in the number of organizations you've worked, would you say there's a resistance to change?
Absolutely, and that's not unique to Sierra Leone. I think what's unique to Sierra Leone is the considerable lack of hope, the hopelessness, the apathy. You think we're into 6 decades of independence, and no one could sit here and tell you things are getting better. There is no country I know of that a Sierra Leonean has traveled to, gone away, come back and says, no, we're okay. We don't need to worry about anything. We're fine. No country. So for me, I think it's what makes that resistance to change here is the lack of faith. I'll give you a specific recent example: traffic lights. I don't think I spoke to anyone who believed traffic lights will work. And even now, there's evidence that maybe it's not working. But what you saw in the early days was people running red lights. And now people stop. And so the person who runs the red light is the other. And even the bike drivers, the keke drivers, they actually comment, hey, they can't get accidents. So people are law-abiding citizens. People do want these things. They do want the change. But you have to visualize it. You have to demonstrate it. And we don't have very effective communication mechanisms or sensitization mechanisms to tell the man, woman, child on the streets, this is a good thing for you. This is going to increase safety. You just have to be a little bit more patient. They have doubts. They lack trust because we've overpromised and underdelivered so many times throughout the last 60 years.
Right.
So that's a recent example. So I think it's hopelessness.
Yeah, I'm happy you brought the traffic lights up because it's not, for me, my opinion is not that the traffic lights won't work. I just think there are too many things hindering its efficiency.
Sure.
For example, street trading, which we haven't been able to deal with. And I don't know if that has to do with what you said, the systems of communication. And I don't know how this can be communicated better. But I'd love to hear your opinion on how to solve that problem.
I think it's unaddressed lawlessness. A good example is junctions. If you remember Sierra Leone before bikes, junctions were clear. And even Hamilton Junction that I use frequently, right? I had to go there most weekends. In May last year, it was clear. It wasn't that many bikes. Then more properties and residences start to happen along the Peninsula Road, and bikes just appeared. When bikes come, traders come. And then when they come, there's markets that open for longer throughout the night. Hamilton Junction used to be clear around 9:30. 11 p.m. if you're going home, it's as active as normally. So I think there's unaddressed lawlessness. So when something springs up, there isn't any effort to say, no, this is not happening here. Even if there is, it's not sustainable. And the systems could be corrupted by someone just passing something to whoever comes to enforce it, and they turn the other way. So for me is, you can communicate all you like. You cannot be here. You have to use the traffic lights. But if there's no punishment, visible accountability, then people will just find workarounds.
So I'm thinking about it, and whose value missing will make person not able for can say yes so not for sell yes so, or why is it that when one person does wrong and everybody would know it's wrong, there are more people joining that person? No, what value is missing there?
I think it's survival. I don't know what the value is, but I think sometimes trading is a matter of your day-to-day and day-to-day.
Right.
For example, I always complain about police officers holding up traffic when they stop kekes just to get that 5 leon so the keke man can go. And I remember I was in the car with my cousin, and he says, let me tell you something. When that policeman come on at 9 morning, it'll tell you, say, begin cook, they bring chop money. So he's going home with money. So the traders that go in, whether it's a woman, the husband will say, make sure you count money. So she looks at that sign and say, if I set up here and start trading here, who's going to stop me? And if I set up and start trading here, I'm going to get money to go home to my husband. It's not going to be a grumpy situation and escalate into something else. So I think it's not a case of something being missing. It's a case of survival. This is what poverty looks like. I am going to do what it takes so when I get home, I have food. But I also think we're generally law-abiding citizens. If you provide people with an alternative, so you designate market area, and there's talk about, well, they'll still come back to this place, like the mudslide place, they went back there. There are examples.
Or even Lumley, because there's a market. There's a market, but people don't use it.
Absolutely. So you have to designate a place, and you have to also enforce the law on both sides of that platform, the traders and the customers. If you come to buy on the street, that's an offense. You have to go in there. So if you as a supplier says, I know the trader and I saw for day, and you as a buyer say, I know the buyer and I know they buy, they'll regulate themselves. I don't think you could over and micromanage trading and economic activity. You can just set the conditions for it and enforce it consistently. Even the bike ban in the central business district, the narrative is the bike man, they know they tire, and the police then go tire, so they will come back, all right? And so right now, there's soldiers in boots and police officers blocking all the areas with canes to beat bikes. But they will come back because it's a question of survival. Would I give you that back there one certain amount? If you know they make that money there, you don't take anything else. So I think it's creating a condition for people to be able to deliver the supply that's clearly in demand. People want to buy those things in Lumley.
Right.
But you're letting it happen on the streets. You can build all these shelters, but who did you consult? Did you really make proper observations? How good was your feasibility study? Who actually analyzed it and said this wouldn't work? So I think you need to create conditions that allow you to still supply a demand, because it's economics, without affecting people's livelihoods.
People always say it never used to be this way. Not so Salon Bintan, and people were not like this before. Are there any events? Obviously, the war is one thing, but how did that affect our behavior, our attitudes, our mindset, just generally to take us to the place that we are now? What do you think?
It's a great question. Let me think of an equally great answer if I can. I think of two things. Urbanization, rapid urbanization. If you don't invest in your rural provinces and decentralize services, then you attract people, especially young people, to the cities. So I think the fundamentals are there's more people in the city. If you look at any trend, any credible data, it will tell you the growth in Freetown is exponentially larger than in the provinces. In fact, in the provinces, there's actually declining growth, especially among young people. So there's demand for more services, there's demand for more space, which means there's demand for investment. I don't believe there's been adequate investment in transport facilities. I don't think there's been enough investment in job creation. I don't believe there's been enough investment in housing, for example. So the reason why somewhere like Lumley would be populated till 11, 12 at night is it means those guys can just sleep somewhere for 2 hours and don't have to have a place to live.
Yeah.
So for me, I think it's a case of just population growth, and we didn't prepare for population growth. If you think of every city like Lagos, Nigeria, for example, country, you move to Abuja as the capital. You think of Tanzania, you go to Dodoma as the capital. So you take a lot of things away from Dar es Salaam. You also provide transport links. They now have electric trains that goes from there. So if you need to go to Dodoma to do some administrative work, there's easy way for you to do so. So it's interconnected, and I think there's a role to be played to really make the provision needed for population growth. And I think that's something didn't happen. Invest in Kenema, and I know there's a lot of effort to do that. Invest in Makeni, Port Loko. Not only do you stem people having to come to Freetown, you also create people going to those places. Then you also have places where we have a mix of residential, commercial, industrial. Then they sell timber next to school, next to church, next to somebody else.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, well, how do we do urban planning better? And there's just so many things. And of course, a lot of that falls onto government. Our mindset as a citizen is like, how for do? I have no choice but to buy my timber there, go to church there, take my kid to school there. Because you as an individual, and even as a small community, have very little impact on how urban planning is done. Most of us don't understand the rules. So how do I influence the people responsible, apart from just electing them?
Right. And what you just said is really important, because I think there's just that general feeling that, yes, there's an understanding that most of these things fall back to government, but I feel like there's an understanding from citizens that they do not have much control when it comes to these things. And perhaps that's why there's the out for do kind of mentality and attitude. But what can be done to change that? What do you think needs to be done to change that?
You have to start from the beginning, education. I think our curriculum is probably still colonial. Not just the content, but the structure and actually the outcomes that we need. I was really hopeful that we look at, the sort of a free basic education. I think you have to move on from this obedience training to problem solving, creative problem solving. You have to go from rote learning to critical thinking. Rote learning is great if it was, you had colonial masters, now they want you to take over your nation. Repetition, just counting 8, what's 1 plus 1, 2, 1 plus 1 is 2, just to memorize stuff. That's great, but actually give me a problem to solve. I can tell you from my work and my observations, any nation that emphasizes comprehension in English language has a higher sort of I don't want to use the word intellect, has a higher literacy rate in its population. When it's just about memorizing to pass exams, you have a problem. So you're just producing people who know how to memorize information, people who are just repeating information.
Right.
But actually, how do I apply it? You know, there's critical literacy, which is if I send you to the shop, like this morning, go print this paper for me. I send someone to go do some printing. I had to tell him exactly what to do step by step, because what is likely to happen is if he goes and they don't have light, they don't have ink, he would maybe try and problem solve himself without letting me know, even though I said I need it by 11:30. So I have to say, if you go there, you may say they don't get light, call me straight away, yeah? And I will tell you what to do. Not just try to solve the problem yourself, because what will happen is he would go 2 or 3 places and I'll be late and he wouldn't come back with what I need. In my view, critical literacy gives him the tools he needs to problem solve, but keep communicating with me, offer solutions, clearly define the problem, and try and think of a way he can solve it so I can still be where I need to be and have what I ask him to do. So I think you start with education. The other thing is we need to stop teaching how to beg, because I think it creates a subservient culture. So you have a narrative that we're a nation of beggars, and we're actually teaching, when I say we, I'm talking about donor agencies, valuable partners in all of this, that everyone wants to apply for a grant. Everyone goes to we need money for do this project, we need money for do this and do that. And so when this conversation about USAID was being defunded, and there were certain African leaders that said, actually, it may be a good thing that now you might be able to stand your own 2 feet. The money you do get doesn't come with conditions attached. So I think if we're able to say, get educated, let's really review our curriculum. Let's help people get critical literacy, be able to problem solve creatively. Let them know that actually maybe your efforts are rewarded without you having to beg for money, because when you beg, you're compromising certain things. It may be your dignity, and psychologically, you feel like you're sort of beholden to someone. It's not easy, and with someone with an accent like this, it's easy for me to say this, and I never lose awareness of my position of privilege, as it were.
Yeah.
But I think from the bottom up, this is a nation that has to say, okay, we got to do better.
Yeah.
Education to just dignity. I think in every United Nations documentation, a fundamental right is dignity. And you cannot claim to be dignified consistently if you're begging nonstop.
Yeah. I have a small segment called Word on the Street, where I just ask random people on the street what they think about the topic we're talking about.
Hey there. If you want to hear opinions about today's topic, check out the Word on the Street segment on the Honestly Speaking YouTube channel. Real people, real voices, real opinions. You don't want to miss it. You'll find the YouTube link right in the episode description. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe while you're there. Now, let's get back to the conversation in the studio.
I still have in the studio with me Dama James, and we're just going to continue talking about this.
I see people who have accepted struggle as destiny, and we have to reject struggle as destiny. We really, really do. I think you can see people want something different, but it's like, I don't know, you cannot expect this. The last lady was talking about pride. That's what she was saying. If you live at this place, so what if you say they can't clean up? You get for there, so. And then, but I think the other theme that came across was we get by that. I don't necessarily think so. We get by that. I think so. We're so lacking in trust of other people or outsiders, even our own fellow citizens. We're guarded. We're like, no, I know they make you gain some space to do this because I don't trust you. And that person sees it as like, oh, you get bad at.
I think the reference to badat is probably not, I don't know, maybe it's not, but badat is not to the right expression.
Language, yeah.
But like some of the examples in the clip, if you see person they go before, rather than coming to ask, okay, can you teach me this skill that you've learned so that I can do better? It's like you would find other ways to sabotage their progress or growth. And what do you call that?
I don't know. I think it's so you can use the media as a catalyst, right? So if someone does well, how did you do it? Don't leave it to the population to fill the gaps and think, oh, then Sabi posting and get corruption, because that happens, right? The second thing is you need to have channels where you can foster like mentorship. So if you answer the question, how did you do it? Wow, how can you help me? You know, I read a book recently that was saying, you know, you should foster collaboration instead of competition to progress, even if you're in the same field. Creative clusters are notorious for just helping people who are perhaps at a lower level to get to where perhaps a successful person is. So it's not bad hat, but I also think we have an opportunity to be able to showcase how people did well. Now, it may be that you speak to that person to understand it, and that's what we need to teach people, not just assume, say, the way you get this thing, so now one way, and no one show you, and then they show you because you're badass because you go, then at the same level. We need to be able to tell people that you can be successful just like that person, and this is how they did it. Why don't you do this? And, you know, the badass comments, I think you're absolutely right. It's not perhaps the right phrasing, but certainly people not necessarily 100% positive about when you're successful. And I think it's because they assume and make assumptions and jump to conclusions on how you did it.
It's also, I think, influenced by their own experience as well, right? Because the first person who spoke, you know, talked about you having all the qualifications for a job, and then at the end of the day, you're not hired. Correct. Someone else is hired because they know someone who knows someone who could probably put them there.
Absolutely.
So that happens. That's an experience that has influenced this perception of Bharat, or perception of how people become successful. And it's very common, as you said. I would say over 50% of the jobs available in Sierra Leone are government jobs. And there is the perception that for a government job, you have to know someone who knows someone to help you get the job.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the question then is, what is, if we were to do something about this as a nation, what is one thing that you could recommend in terms of like changing people's perceptions of success and how you make it in life?
Sure. Yeah. I think in any other circumstance, it would be transparency. Using your job example. So I go for a job, I don't get it because even get posting for that job there. That is so normalized, we all accept it. What we want to be is that person we didn't get for that job there. So that's the sort of route to getting that job. The redress should be, please tell me your hiring process. Let me be transparent. You know, we shortlist a number of candidates. This is how we score it. And the people along that chain, they're independent. They don't really know. And then you do have a chain. Right now, there isn't a chain. Go talk to me, uncle. Let's talk to me. Go there, you shake hands. That guy does you a favor. Why? Because your dad or your mom did that person a favor. So the way you address it is just more transparency in any normal society. But when the fundamentals of transparency and accountability don't even exist in the society, you cannot expect it to exist in the hiring process. So for me, it comes down to something very, very, very simple. We need to build better institutions. And I don't think citizens can do that. I think what citizens can do is hold the institutions to account and give them the tools to hold the institutions to account. I think of the phrase, you know, leadership is not power. It's about planting the tree that provides a shade that you will never get to sit in. So I think of the leaders of Singapore. I think of some of the leaders of Ghana when they started. When they were like, we're going to build good institutions, we know it's going to outlive us, but we're going to do it for our people. I think we just need to see more evidence of that kind. More evidence of, okay, this is the shades all man go enjoy.
But who side and leader then they get for come out? They're from the citizens, right?
I have faith that
good
they're here.
Citizens make good leaders. Bad citizens make bad leaders.
I have faith that they're here. I think we, as a population, not only do we hold them to account, or part of holding them account is being able to champion, push, and support who we believe are good leaders. But you cannot put them into a system that we know is rotten. I think you have to do both in tandem. Help build really, really strong institutions, strengthen governance. And I know there's efforts to do it. We have an ACC. You know, we have so many tools that we, you know, People are helping us to push to be able to help you submit complaints. Like yesterday was the first time I knew that if I wanted to complain about a teacher or an education professional, there's a portal for me to do so. Now, these things exist, but we don't let people know, or we don't communicate very well. There's a way for you to report corruption anonymously, for example. How many people know that? So we hear there's an ACC, but how do I go and say, I think my boss is taking a bribe, or I think my teacher is being inappropriate with a student and stuff like that? So these tools exist. They're not utilized. They're not adopted. And I think we as citizens need to call on those in power to just build better institutions, and we need to champion people who we think foster values that can keep those institutions sustained after they leave.
The other thing I thought about while you were responding to that is whether exposure can change some of these perceptions
Absolutely.
or cultures. Because we always talk about this, and even with the traffic light scenario you talked about, there are people who in Sierra Leone run red lights, but they would never do that when they're outside of Sierra Leone, when they're outside of Freetown.
Yeah.
And so it begs the question about whether exposure really has an impact on how we behave, our attitudes. Because you could know better, but you don't do better.
Correct. I have a wonderful answer for you in my view anyway. Would you shout in an art gallery?
No.
Would you shout in a museum space, for example?
No.
Would you shout in a funeral home?
Depends.
My point is, your environment dictates your behavior. There's the belief that architecture imposes its values on you. When you go to an art gallery, high ceilings, white walls, pictures are spaced out. Oh, assess me what's bad. So in Sierra Leone, there's chaos, it's loud. You have no choice but to maneuver and navigate it as you find it. In the UK, there's order. In America, there's order. In parts of Africa, there's order, so you behave accordingly. So I think exposure shows you it working. And most people who are exposed that come back, they're like, we should do this. We could be more like this country, that country.
Yeah.
Many of us are fortunate that we travel. That's a privilege. I think we should, consider in a country where even having a debit card is a status. We travel, so we see these things working, we come back, and we're sad. Like, you can go to Rwanda, see how green it is, and instead of enjoying it, you're like, this should be in Sierra Leone. So exposure absolutely influences your behavior. But because most people, this is their norm, it's normalized to run a traffic light. It's normalized to not have a traffic light in the first place. It's normal to just jump on a bike as an 18-year-old, put a helmet on and just ride people around the city. They don't see it working. That's working for them. So the traffic light is, this, you're changing something.
Yeah.
And again, I go back to what I said earlier. I haven't met anyone who's traveled, come back and says, we don't need to change anything, we're fine.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think to end it on the note of change, how do you see Sierra Leone evolving? I know some of the work that you do with digitization is to help us evolve in that way. But how do you see us progressing? Let's say in the next 10, 20 years, what do we need to change if we need to be where a country like Rwanda is?
First thing we need to do, it's not too late to do this. We need to construct what my friend calls a post-war narrative and national identity. I'm a Sierra Leonean. I went to school in FBC, went to school in Prince of Wales. I was running and crying during the NPRC coup because I thought the war had got to Freetown. Went from King Tom to Mount Oriole as a teenager. And I couldn't tell you what our post-war narrative is. What do we want to be? What's our sense of identity? I can get 10 different answers from 10 different people. So I think when you foster that sort of shift, evolution in the mindset, saying, okay, this is who we are, you then start to construct a road towards what you want to be. I also think we need to stop listening to outside myths of who we are. There's a narrative of like war plus poverty porn. I think let's just say we're resilient people, we're tenacious, but resilience is not a tool. Yes, we need it when we need to be strong, but it shouldn't be day to day. You shouldn't be resilient day to day. I also think we need to reject, again, this sort of struggle as that's just normal. I also think we need to spotlight solutions, not survival. This like by God in power, I'll see you tomorrow. No, okay, what's the solution? That worked. Your brother made that work. Your sister made that work. See how you can help. And of course, the bigger thing is, and this is a call to people that can, we need to invest in a multitude of systems that actually prevents future struggle, right? So, for example, healthcare, there is no reason why it should be a shoulder shrug when you hear that a baby died because there was no fuel for the generator in the hospital. That's just unacceptable. So we need to invest not just in shifting our mindsets, but in the systems that actually create belief in those systems. So people are saying, do you know what? I know if my child falls ill, I can go to a hospital, and it's the condition maybe the one that makes we lose them, not the lack of provision of care.
Yeah.
And I just think we as a nation have a lot of successes that we can highlight, particularly in my field, whether it's the Christex Foundation, DSTI, where they're trying to foster innovation, entrepreneurship, people who are trying to help. And we need to really collectively make use of anyone who says, hey, I want to help. My experience of coming back after a number of years is mixed. There's skepticism of why you're here, because a lot of people see opportunity. So it's like, okay, I can set business now, I make money, but I end up go me picking ended it. And so people kind of resist. But I think we need to embrace some of the efforts that people want to make, and we meet them where we find them. But it all starts with helping shift the mindsets with education, and not listening to other people's definition of our identity and say, this is who we are post-war, post-Ebola, and post-COVID, and then just let that drive who we are as citizens going forward.
Wow, I think that's a perfect note to end this. Thank you very much, Dama, for your time. This has been Honestly Speaking. I'm Antonia Howard. We've been recording at Black Lion Production Studio. A big thank you to Dama James, our guest, and our fantastic crew behind the scenes.
That's it for today's episode of Honestly Speaking. Thank you for listening and being a part of these important conversations. If you've enjoyed today's discussion, please like and share. And if you're feeling inspired, do leave a review. I'd love to hear what you think. And of course, carry on the conversation online. Share your thoughts, experiences, and ideas using #HonestlySpeakingSL. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay honest.